Today I want to talk about broken trust. I sniffed something suspicious with DC Studios, Gunn, Safran and Zaslav from the very beginning. The fact that DC Studios didn't launch with a social media account, which is very strange for any studio. That was odd, and for ages they didn't seem to have anyone working with them. No staff, no employees. Then they started announcing Christina Hodson as part of their team, some problematic DC comic book writers as well, a couple. But still, DC Studios doesn't really seem prepared to make films and make television shows. Could I be just cheeky to say it seems like DC Studios has two people there, Peter Safran and James Gunn. But there were a lot of red flags from the very, very beginning. We were all kind of theorising if it would be a full reboot, if he would continue the Snyderverse. Now, I pretty much knew he was never going to continue the Snyderverse because the side of the fence he's on, you've got to understand, and I say this every day and it must be boring to you guys, but he's on the Toby Emmerich Hamada side of things. Make no mistake, he's on the side of the people who run WB Pictures or who ran WB Pictures who hated Snyder. There is no question about that. I remember when Joss Whedon was first accused by Ray Fisher about the horrible things that Ray Fisher accused Joss of. And James Gunn came out publicly and didn't believe it. This is not the Joss Whedon that I know. Liar! And of course Ray Fisher called him out. Quite right too. So all we've really had since James Gunn and Safran have come in is lies upon lies upon lies. Broken promises. Broken trust. That is the theme I want to talk under today. Because I think it's important. I mean, these revelations about Gunn's opinion of Batman 89, of The Dark Knight and Batman Begins, which he outright hates, like he outright hates Batman 89, and he mocked Jack Nicholson. These are things that I can't just tell you, as a DC fan, to respect his opinion, because it's the way the opinion was executed. I am the great James Gunn, and I am superior to Martin Scorsese, Jack Nicholson, Tim Burton and Christopher Nolan. No, you're bloody not. You are an average bloody filmmaker. But ever since your success of Guardians Volume 1, your head's been right up your backside. Let's be honest about it. And I noticed it. And I had to temper your ego. I remember on social media how arrogant you were when Guardians was successful. You clearly weren't prepared for your success. And as we see, you've never been prepared for this success because of the stuff scattered around social media. But it isn't really his views, his toxic views about Burton, Nolan and Nicholson that truly concern me. They do concern me because these are things that shouldn't be left on the internet. People say, well, he said it 11 years ago. Why didn't he delete these things? He knew they'd be a problem. Surely he knows he had a dozen conversations on different social media platforms. He's made enemies. That's the problem as well. He has made enemies from the Snyderverse stands for removing Henry Cavill. But let's be absolutely clear. Henry Cavill and James Gunn could never have worked together. Never. Henry Cavill doesn't suffer fools gladly. He doesn't like people messing around with the integrity of the characters he's playing, or the shows or the movies that he's in. Very good news, by the way. Henry Cavill and Chad Slavinsky, I think that's how you say his name. It's not how you say his surname. He's basically the John Wick director, are still doing a Highlander reboot, and Chad says it's going to be a whole franchise and it's going to be inspired by the TV show a bit, which I loved, starring Adrian Paul. So very, very exciting just to talk about that there and just mention that. So Henry Cavill goes from strength to strength, and this guy Chad, this John Wick director, is perfect because he's another superior director to James Gunn, and he resists the urge to shit on other creatives, like most all creatives do. So Although those comments are problematic, it isn't the biggest of his missteps and his crimes. He came in and it was all very, very interesting. I mean, listen, it's all very suspicious from the very beginning. He comes in to do Suicide Squad. There's rumours of him taking over DC. So clearly, this was a plan of some sorts, right? Which he denies. But when these rumours came out of him running DC, he said he wasn't interested in that. He came out with his arrogant words, with his egotistical words, as he normally does, and says, no way, that's not what I want to do. Well, now, it is what you want to do. You said this was an opportunity you couldn't reject. You couldn't pass by. This was very different to the man who said this is something he would or could never do. Now he's actually seeing the challenge of the task. Why is it difficult to be the co-CEO of DC Studios? Why is it difficult to restructure DC? Why is it difficult to set a new foundation and a new direction? Because he wants to do one thing, Zaslav and Safran want to do the other. So I can exclusively tell you a few things that you're not going to like, but I'll tell you them anyway. James Gunn never wanted to do a Superman film. James Gunn never wanted the next film to be a Batman film. He didn't want that. James Gunn doesn't really like Batman and Superman as a habit. I'm sure he used to like reading them. I'm not saying that. But if he had the choice, a Superman especially in a Batman film were never going to be the directions he wanted to go in. The only reason he's doing a Superman film first is because David Zaslav wants a Superman film. The only reason he's directing this Superman film is because he's been forced into it by Safran and Zaslav. But Safran was really pressuring him, as he admitted himself, to direct Superman Legacy, something he wasn't sure he wanted to do. And if he didn't want to do it, isn't that a problem within itself? Isn't James Gunn directing a film he wasn't sure he wanted to do? Isn't that a problem? Won't that affect the final result? These are questions that we've been talking about for months and months. These are things that I've spoken about with you, and we've had our little conversations about them. So these were all troubling things. I was also very concerned about James Gunn making a Superman film. And I don't have a clue what kind of Superman film this is going to be. At a guess, this is going to be a world-building Dick Donner Superman movie, where they put all the pieces of the new DCU together, so we'll see loads of cameos and things like that. But they kind of do this Superman story, where it's not an origin story. Well, we don't start off on Krypton. He's been Superman for 1 year. A lot of people are happy about that because they're fed up of Superman origin stories. Well, let's recount how many Superman origin stories, movies, for example, we've had. So we had Superman the movie. Now, because everyone says we've had too many Superman origins, so let's look at this, because this is how dumb DC fans can be sometimes. And I'm a DC fan, obviously, a passionate one. But some of them are so dumb. So Superman 2 is not an origin, is it? Superman 3 is not an origin, right? Superman 4 is not an origin. Superman Returns is a continuation of the Reeve franchise, right? It's not an origin. So Man of Steel and Superman the movie are the only two Superman origin movies. And we had Smallville, which was a show about the character's origin. So we've had three kind of things, right, that have been origins. So fair enough, he didn't want to do an origin. I don't care. I don't care. Personally, if you're going to do a new take, it's probably better to set your foundations out properly. But if you don't want to do an origin, I've got a bloody good idea. Don't fire Henry Cavill. Then you wouldn't have to do an origin again in the first place, would you? But Henry and James wouldn't have worked well together. I don't believe they would have worked well together. No question about that. It would have ended in tears anyway. I have no doubt about that. But what's really interesting is, when we all went to the cinema to see Justice League, there was broken trust there. The trust was broken. And none of us really felt that we could trust them anymore. But it was interesting because everyone came in for Aquaman, which made $1 billion. Unless they lied about that box office. Now, there are issues with making up box office numbers because Disney are being sued by another company for underplaying the box offices they were making so they didn't have to pay their partners as much money. And it's all coming back to haunting them now. Disney are in huge trouble and it couldn't make me more happier. So I think very, very few people now trust James Gunn. My trust for James Gunn is absolutely broken. And it isn't really anything to do with what he said about Nolan, Nicholson and Tim Burton. It's nothing to do with that. It goes deeper than that. Because when you look deeper at their appointment, Gunn's and Safran's appointments, problematic, surprising, definitely surprising. But it's the conducting, it's the execution of what they're supposed to be doing. He's called Snyder fans toxic, couldn't keep his mouth shut. He's got into comments of other fans at the early days because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. People criticise high-profile creatives every day. And they manage to refuse the urge to come in on them. You can't be attacking your customers no matter the provocation. You are in a very enviable position and you must act accordingly. That's the way it should work. But James Gunn hasn't acted accordingly. But this is not just about James Gunn. I want to be clear. I'm not going after James Gunn for the hell of it. There's a problem here. None of it makes sense. Like the refusal to do a full reboot. Like the insistence to interfere in these existing DCEU movies. And that doesn't make sense either. Not to me, not to anyone. Even to Gunn's defenders. Even they don't understand why they're not getting a full reboot. Because the old regime is part of the new regime. That's the thing. They were able to get their claws into Zaslav and convince him to keep Safran as the studio as co-CEO with James Gunn. James Gunn is a puppet. He's the puppet of Toby Emmerich. The man, the reason why James Gunn ended up doing The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. These are the truths. That's why James Gunn is really there. We were reading an article on this very show yesterday where we were talking about David Ayer and the Ayer Cut. And I was telling you my view. James Gunn has promised one day, the Ayer Cut will be shared. Basically, he's going, there, David, everything's going to be all right. He's lying to you. Under Gunn, Zaslav and Safran, while WB Discovery are in partnership, there will never be a release of the Ayer Cut. And if I'm wrong, as usual, clip this, and I'll apologise, as I always do when I'm wrong. But I'm not wrong. These are people that can't be trusted, who have broken the trust of the DC fans. And it does go back to the Snyder Cut and Justice League, where they've had so many opportunities since Justice League to rebuild the trust between us. But every time they do have, inadvertently, a modicum of trust from us, they break the trust again and again and again. You think you're on hollow ground, and then you're basically, the ground is leaving where you're standing. Because these people are a travesty. These people really don't deserve to be running DC. And I want to get something out there as well. I want to ask, for a few minutes, what is a DC fan? A DC fan is someone who just likes one thing. If you like one DC thing, you're a DC fan. No one has the right to tell you you're not a DC fan. If you're a Snyder fan, you're a DC fan. If you're a Snyderverse DC fan, you're a DC fan. There's no difference. If you're a fan of the comics, if you're a fan of one graphic novel or 20 graphic novels, you're a DC fan. If you like Superman the movie, you're a DC fan. Right, you get me? If you're a Smallville fan, you're a DC fan. There's no real fans and fake fans. You're not a better fan because you read the comics. And you're not a lesser fan just because you watch the animation, the movies and the TV shows but don't read the comics. There's nothing wrong with not reading the comics, right? Not all of us have the concentration to sit there reading comics day in and day out. That's fine. And I absolutely respect that you read the comics, and that's great. But you don't have the right to tell me and my other brethren that they're not real DC fans. For whatever reason you're saying. There's no such thing as you're not a DC fan. So let's get that out there as well. We're never going to be a unified fan base. There's no such thing as a unified fan base. But DC fans are extra divided because of everything that's been happening since 2017's Justice League. But it goes beyond that. It goes, the divide really started with Batman versus Superman. A lot of people hate that film, a lot of people love that film. It caused the divide. But the thing is, ever since Man of Steel and before Justice League and Shazam, actually the Snyderverse's box office was going up. Man of Steel 650, Batman vs Superman 850, The Suicide Squad just under 800, Wonder Woman just around 800, Justice League a flop, Aquaman $1 billion if we believe what they said. They were desperate to get a hit after that, so maybe they lied, but who knows? We can only go with the official numbers. So then you get, this is like, from Shazam, this is when they decide to go all MCU. Well, ever since they've decided to go all MCU, once they officially, properly got rid of Snyder, it's been flop after flop after flop. Why is that? You all wanted colour, you all wanted jokes, you all wanted brighter costumes. Where are you? Why aren't you in the cinema? Because it really isn't the DC way to make a plastic package of DC. Put tape on it, glue it up, and put it out there. Nobody's interested. That's why people are not interested in Blue Beetle. It's not a proper Blue Beetle movie. It's an MCU Blue Beetle movie with 75% gags and bright colours and bright suits. And there's a couple of good things in there as well, which I complimented in the non-spoiler review. But it isn't good. It isn't Man of Steel, it isn't BVS, it isn't even the theatrical cut of Suicide Squad. And that's saying something, right? It may not even be Justice League. You can't make money from trying to copy somebody else's recipe. And that's the truth of the situation. You can't be the MCU. You can only be DC. And you certainly can't try and restructure and recycle Snyder's universe and try and lighting it up and make it MCU. That's what Justice League attempted to do. Take what Zack did and make it into the MCU. Make it into the first Avengers movie. Insanity. Insanity. How many times have I said, if you didn't want to do what Snyder was doing, start again. But they're even too lazy and too greedy to do that. But where has that laziness and greed got them? They tried to do it again with The Flash under Hamada. Restructure everything. Lazily. Where did that get them? Fucking nowhere. And now they're trying to do it again with Gunn's mini reboot, partial reboot. Not a full reboot, because they're lazy, greedy bastards who don't want to start from scratch. And that's the problem. The whole thing is a facade, as I've been saying for days, weeks and months. And I've been giving you each puzzle piece ever since Gunn has been put in place. Now, sometimes I've been complimentary to James Gunn. There's things I like about him and the stuff that he's done that I like, and that's fine. But I have been very, very consistent in terms of the things I've said, the red flags that I've seen, the fact that they've only announced the first part of the Gods and Monsters slate. But there's not much there. For example, we have one film that's in pre-production. We do have a SAG-AFTRA and WAG, industrial action right now, so I get it. But the truth is, they are still announcing casts and stuff in films and TV shows. They're still allowed to do that, but no one's allowed to do press. So you are allowed to cast people, right, and make decisions. I don't know how that works, but they are. Anyway, so Superman Legacy is apparently in pre-production. They're designing costumes, they're sorting that out. That's apparently what they're doing. They've cast David Corenswet as Clark Kent and Superman. And the other girl is Lois Lane, whose name escapes me right now, so I apologise to her. there seems to be a cast. They've also cast their own Green Lantern, who's a very famous guy who is, part of the Joss Whedon world and all of that. What's his name? He's playing Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern. Interesting. So there's going to be a Guy Gardner in Superman Legacy. Well, that's interesting. I must admit that's a little bit intriguing and a little bit exciting for a DC fan like me. I can't just wave it away and say that's a bad thing, but people have complained that they don't want a Superman movie being a cameo fest for this brand new DC universe. I can understand those fears from fans. They want to see Superman done justice. But maybe a Superman film in the modern era, because Superman doesn't have the kids on his side. He's not as popular as some of the MCU characters. He's not as popular as even some of the DC characters, like Batman. So maybe that will do him a favour. I don't know. As I keep on saying, it's all about execution. And we don't know how this film's going to be executed. It will be very interesting if this film actually happens. And for me, that's not 100% certainty that James Gunn's DC Universe will even happen, or that a Superman Legacy and Brave and the Bold will ever see the light of day. I still have my doubts. We'll see. We'll see if it happens, because it's interesting. But if we do see it, it will be intriguing to see the results of Superman Legacy, because everything rests now on Superman Legacy. So, like Creature Commandos. Look, listen, Gunn can do entertaining shit. I have no doubt I'm going to like Creature Commandos. I'm not just going to hate stuff because Gunn's irritated me over some of his plans and what he said about Nicholson, Nolan and Burton. I'm not going to go after everything he does. I'm not going to pretend I never said I love the Guardians trilogy and Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. I've said that. I'm not going back on that. It's about consistency, but just because I like the stuff some people do, it doesn't mean they escape my fury, my constructive criticism. Because that's not a YouTube platform that you really want, is it? Someone who sits on the fence and tells you what you want to fucking hear. I mean, I've lost count. This channel would have been so successful if I sat on the fucking fence. I remember when all my subscribers were Snyder fans and I started criticising Zack over this and that. Constructive criticism that I stand by, as I said the other day. Doesn't mean I don't love the guy, don't admire the guy, don't love his stuff, but I've got to constructively criticise people. There has to be a balance. The amount of people who have left this channel because they don't like the directness of my style. I am direct. I don't pretend. I don't pretend about me. I've sat here before and told you I like hot, sexy fucking women. I love drinking. I love smoking. And I'm not ashamed of that. When I see a woman, the first thing I see is her attractiveness. I'm not going to go back on that. I'm a direct alpha fucking male. And certainly, I'm not going to pretend I'm anything else, right? Old-fashioned guy, born in the 70s. You ain't fucking changing me. I'm not a he, him. I'm a he. If you want to change your gender, I have no problem with you, right? But you're not dictating what I am and how I refer myself. So I'm a direct person, and when I talk about DC, when I talk about entertainment over on Twitter and on here, it's always going to be very, very direct. I'm not Boba Talks. I'm not here to make money. I'm not Chris Wong-Svensson, who started off with a great channel doing half an hour coverage of DC news, right? Beautiful. Then basically once in a blue moon doing 3 to 5 minute videos. What a shame. All because he just wants to make money. He was a great YouTuber. And it's a shame. I've followed so many YouTubers that start off so well, but once the subs and the likes come in, they change who they are. Boba Talks is the same. He just used to be a good kid who loved the Gotham TV show and spoke about that show. And he's very good at what he does, Boba. I like Boba. But once he got successful and a few actors from a few DC shows he was talking about were patting him on the head, things changed. He'll criticise this and that, but the truth is, Boba isn't willing to stick his head against the parapet. Chris Wong-Svensson, another person I still admire, isn't willing to say, he does now and again, but normally not on his channel, normally on Twitter. So it's not direct. I'm looking for direct people. I like direct people who say what they think. I'm not interested in people who say things so they can make money. I'll watch people like that, but let's be clear, if I'm watching your channel, you're not fooling me. It's because you fucking amuse me, and that's it. So I'm a direct person, and I need to talk about DC in a direct style, in a direct fashion. So this is why I'm not very popular, because I don't have any airs and graces. I'm going to tell you what I think. So if you come at me, if we're doing a live, or if I'm on a premiere, like maybe I am now, or maybe you're watching after the premiere, right? So you can only comment, and I'm not seeing your comments straight away, right? But if I can see your comments, and you say something I don't like, yes, I'm going to be very direct. I'm not being rude, I'm not bullying you, but I'm very passionate. Because I started a channel so my voice could be heard. I started a channel because I was fucking fed up of everyone else, like Campier and Randolph having their say, and my voice being silent. And this is what motivated me to start this channel. And I don't regret it for a day. It's never been successful. It was never about being successful. But unless you do something, you don't buy the ticket. If you don't buy the ticket, you can't win the raffle. DC is in a mess of astronomical proportions. That's not me being dramatic. This is not for dramatic effect. The James Gunn, Zaslav situation is utterly, utterly worrying. Some of their plans do sound interesting. Superman Legacy could be a great movie. Brave and the Bold could be a great movie. Superman Woman of Tomorrow, let's say that again, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow could be a great movie. You know, Swamp Thing. These all sound very, very exciting. But as I've also said before, these are just titles on a bit of paper, right? We just don't know. We just don't know. It seems like I don't trust these people. It seems like I feel that they're saying a lot of things that they're never going to do. That's how I feel about DC Studios. I don't feel the finite reality of it. I feel like I'm being told we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but I can't see anything. And the irony isn't lost on me that he literally cast a younger actor who looks exactly like Henry Cavill to play Superman. In other words, they didn't want Cavill, so they went and brought someone in who looks exactly like Cavill, but around 10 years younger. He ain't even that young. He's 29, he's around 29. I thought they were going to go like early 20s, 25. I mean, when Reeve first started, he was about 24. When Ralph first started, I think he was about 24 as well. I actually think that David Corenswet at 29 is actually a little bit too old. I mean, I think the official age for Superman becoming Superman in the comics is 28, I think. But I would have preferred someone slightly younger. I like the way Corenswet looks. I think he's a very good actor. I think Corenswet will be a great Clark Kent and a great Superman. I don't have any issues with him. Here's the problem. We had the same problem with Christopher Reeve. For years, nobody would accept anyone else as Superman. Not Dean Cain, not Tom Welling, not this one, not that one. It was only till we got Henry Cavill and people really started to see Henry Cavill as a contemporary modern-day Superman. And his abrupt firing has made him irreplaceable. It's going to be very, very hard for David, and I hope he doesn't get abused, because I'm happy for his casting. He looks like Superman. I've seen him act in other things. He looks terrific. This is not about hating Rachel Brosnahan, that's her name, Rachel Brosnahan as Lois, or David Corenswet. This is not about being personal about them, because some fans simply don't get that at times. I wish them all the best. I want Superman Legacy to be great. I always want DC to thrive. I don't want DC to fail so I can scream, you see, you shouldn't have fired Snyder, you shouldn't have fired Cavill, you shouldn't have fired Affleck, right, blah, blah, blah. I don't want that. I don't want DC films to fail for that reason. I don't want DC films to fail at all. When DC films fail, I'm not happy. But when they do fail these days, I'm actually not surprised. And when films fail, it's because the consumer didn't go to the cinema. And the reason people won't go to the cinema to watch DCEU movies and maybe even DC Universe movies is because of the broken trust